Hi there, this is LZ Granderson, sports and culture columnist for the Los Angeles Times. And we're wrapping up Pride Month. And this has been a Pride Month like no other, thanks in large part to the pandemic, of course. We didn't have our normal parades and celebrations as many of us have grown accustomed to during this time of year, but we did have some things to really celebrate. Obviously, the Supreme Court decision being one of them, but there's also a reflection, an opportunity to reflection and looking back on the candidacy of the first openly gay competitive campaign, and the fact this individual actually won a caucus, which was the first time that actually has happened as well as being openly gay candidate running for president. And Mayor Pete Buttigieg is with me now. As I mentioned off camera, a little disappointing. I'm sure some followers will be too. We didn't get the bearded Pete, but it's okay. We can superimpose it later
There you
so
go.
that everyone can have that. You heard the introduction. Do you ever get tired of hearing that you made history?
No, I'm so humbled to have been able to play that role. And look, I'm very much standing on the shoulders of giants. And the best thing that I can say about having had that historic campaign is that it will hopefully make it a little bit easier for other people who come along in the future. But there's such a long chain of events from back through the origins of Pride some 50 years ago and on into the future of LGBTQ equality that's still a long way from being complete or secure. And to be able to play a small part in that is something that, it wasn't the main reason I ran for president. I wanted to be a president for everybody, but over time came to really embrace and just be honored by the chance to play that role.
Which aspects of running for president as an openly gay man did you anticipate and you were accurate about, and which parts did you anticipate and you were inaccurate about?
Well, I knew there'd be some static, and that was accurate. I mean, we had some really interesting people disrupting, especially some of our earliest events. From the far right, but then they kind of got used to it, and maybe that was a bit of a surprise. That by the end, it was not always one of the top 3 or top 5 things that even came up in an interview or in a story or in an appearance. Never ran away from it, but never let it be the only thing that defined us either. And I think that's how most of us like to think about our LGBTQ identity. It's something that we're proud of, and it's part of who we are. It's also not all there is to who we are. I was not really ready for the range of people who would share what this campaign meant for them, including a lot of people who were older, people my parents' age who never dreamed that they would be able to see a moment like this, all the way through to young people, teenagers, especially when we were in more conservative areas, who I think represented a really powerful reminder that, the queer experience is very different depending on where you live. And I know there's some areas where there's no place where it's simple, but there are some areas where it's totally unremarkable to be an out candidate or an out elected official or just an out person. But others, there are still kids I would encounter who would kind of share with me in a confidential way what they were going through, kind of whispered on a rope line while we're shaking hands, or sending a note. And, reminded me of some 20 years ago here in South Bend, not knowing a single out person in my high school or anywhere around. And that's still the reality for a lot of youth around the country right now.
What do you think years from now the rural community is going to think about your candidacy? We already know what the urban America is going to think. You're going to be celebrated, maybe get a plaque here or there, maybe a statue, who knows. But in rural America, how do you think that you're going to be remembered there?
Well, one of the things about the LGBTQ community is we're everywhere, right? I can't think of any other minority other than perhaps the community of Americans with disabilities who have this kind of range across every racial and geographic and professional and age and income group. And so, the reality is there is a queer experience in rural America that's definitely different than it is in a lot of our biggest cities, but is very real. And, I really prided myself on the way that our campaign succeeded, especially in some of those counties, a lot of those counties in Iowa, for example, that helped deliver our caucus win were the very places that had famously voted for Barack Obama and then voted for Donald Trump. And being able to reach out to people, again, neither downplaying nor being completely defined by identity, I hope will make it easier for people in those communities to live full lives as themselves.
Were you surprised at all that despite being openly gay and proud, as you said earlier, that you still weren't warmly embraced by perhaps some of the more liberal aspects or liberal arm of the LGBTQ community?
You know, one of the things that our community does sometimes is I think police its own boundaries. And, you know, I very quickly realized that if I tried to sort myself into other people's views of what a gay person ought to look like and try not to be, you know, not gay enough or too gay, that I'd be defeating the whole purpose of coming out, which is to just be who you are and let people get to know you. And look, if you have a different view on a policy issue and you're also queer, it's not like you have to vote for somebody who's part of the LGBTQ community, right? So I respect that in a lot of ways. The only thing that I took issue with was this idea that, you know, there's one way that's better than some other way to be out or to be queer, because everybody's the whole idea, I think, the whole value set of pride is the power of being your authentic self, whoever that is. One of the things you learn early on when you're a mayor, right, is to engage with critics, to try to drop your defensiveness, listen to what people have to say. And, you know, I think our campaign had to find its voice in a lot of ways. We had to grow in a lot of ways. You know, whether it was making sure that we were doing a better job of reaching out to Black and brown communities that we really needed to earn trust with, or whether it was making sure that, you know, our organization was effectively connecting with people across the ideological spectrum of the Democratic Party. You know, you have to be in a process of constant dialogue, and often I learned more from some of my harshest critics, as long as they were there in good faith, than from the folks who were kind of on the same page all along.
And it's been my experience, and I too am openly gay, and it's been my experience that a number of cisgender white men who are gay feel as if they can identify with minorities because of that. But you seem to have been handcuffed a little bit within this sort of intersection, if you will, and you struggled to achieve getting Black votes during your campaign. Why do you think that was?
I'm not sure it had anything to do with sexuality. And I think every struggle for recognition and every struggle for equality is different. You know, one of the really remarkable things about Joe Biden is he was really the only candidate to have a level of trust. And even if you dig into numbers, you know, double-digit support in Black communities. And I think a lot of that was a relationship built over time. And I think about that here at home, where, you know, not only do I have strong supporters and harsh critics in the Black community, but a lot of people who support me strongly in some of my choices and disagreed with some of the others. And that's what a real relationship is like, especially with voters who I think have often felt and been taken for granted. And the chance to build that relationship, it takes time. And it frankly, is better if people can see who you are over years when you're not asking for something, when you're not running for president. And one of the things, you know, whether I ever run for office again or not, that I'm really thinking about in terms of meeting this moment is how to take the tools that are now in my hands, the community of supporters that we have, the social media reach that we have. And when it comes to being an effective ally, especially at this moment that is bringing such a reckoning, with so many standing up, Black voices saying what they've been saying all along, and a lot of white, well-intentioned white people maybe waking up to this in a different way. You know, making sure that I'm able to do my little part to help meet the moment, so that this really does become a country where it's beyond question that Black lives are valued equally. That's an obligation that I think is only even more urgent and pressing now that I'm off the campaign trail.
But when you reflect back on your own candidacy, where do you think you may have missed the mark?
Well, you know, I think it was really important to build that kind of engagement from day one, and it took us more time to find a voice. There were missteps, and then, you know, we were also dealing with the anguish of my own community, especially after a police shooting of a Black man that took place in the summer of last year. And, we spent a lot of time, I only really felt like we were finding our voice when I spent more time listening than talking, often outside of the environments where the cameras and observers were there to really make sure that what I had to say was reflecting not my view of, the world according to Pete, but trying to channel some of the experiences of others.
Let's gay it up again and and chat a little bit about the past year. You and Chasten celebrated your second anniversary, and I saw in an interview you were discussing the boundaries still for LGBTQ people when it came to adoptions. Is this one of the issues that you would like to address in whatever capacity that you're in? And then two, are you expecting you one day to having kids?
Yeah, we're thinking in a very real way about family and about kids. And I think both of us are excited about that and what it can mean. And also both of us are aware that our options are limited in a state and in a country where there's still a lot of discrimination when it comes to access to services around adoption, even though there are so many kids as well as parents who will benefit. So look.
Could you talk a little bit about those restrictions for those who are watching who have no idea what some of the restrictions and barriers you're referring to?
Yeah, I mean, one of the simplest is that there are a lot of agencies who just won't serve same-sex couples even now. And we had a landmark court decision when it comes to civil rights protections like employment discrimination. That doesn't mean that everything's equal for everybody all of a sudden. There's still a lot of areas, including, and there are also a lot of conflicting pieces of guidance coming out from even our own government when it comes to international adoptions. We've got such a long way to go, and we're not really equal unless everybody is. And that's not only the case for a same-sex couple like us thinking about families, but we've got to make sure we're there for example, the continued crisis of violence against Black trans women that we know is going on right now. Again, until everybody is really authentically experiencing that sense of safety and that sense of belonging and that reality of equality, then I think we've all got to be working with everything that we've got, and I want to be part of that.
You brought up the epidemic of Black trans people being murdered in this country, and the lack of protections and care afterwards. What can the LGBTQ community do better to help uplift this element of the community? Because it's been my experience that there's still some within the body that don't fully embrace that community, perhaps the way that they would like it to be embraced.
Well, first we've just got to make sure we name this, that we name our trans members of this community, and that we name the problems like violence, like an administration putting out guidance that basically defines transgender Americans out of existence, that we resist things like the effort to prevent trans people from serving, which I got to tell you, as somebody who served in Afghanistan, I could not care less if the person sitting next to me in a vehicle was transgender or anything else about them, for that matter, other than that they had their eyes open and were making sure that we were safe. And there's no military value in that kind of attack on trans Americans. I do think our community, precisely because there's so much range in it, it's such an internally diverse world of LGBTQIA plus Americans, has a responsibility to make sure we are at one another's side and lifting each other up in every way possible. And I think this moment in terms of the movement for Black lives has also reminded us about the importance of allyship. Look, as a gay man, rights came to me because people like me, and people not at all like me stood together and were there for each other to bring about those expanded rights and protections. And now I've got to be there for people who aren't like me either.
I do know a couple of days ago it was announced that you will be teaching at Notre Dame. Can you talk a little bit about your involvement with the university? And is this a new permanent course, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, the academic?
So I'm really looking forward to being in an academic environment again. I'm joining the Institute for Advanced Study there, which is an interdisciplinary group with a remarkable range of scholars working on everything from racial bias in algorithms to post-conflict reconstruction to issues of faith. And this year, the fellows who are coming together are all researching the issue of trust, which I think is so critically important to our future. You know, we're living in a moment where our lives depend on whether we can trust each other, whether we're going to trust experts offering a vaccine for this pandemic, whether the world will trust the United States, whether there's anything left of our trust in institutions.
I know that you and your hubby are big Hamilton fans. The musical will be live streaming this week. What is your favorite song from the musical Hamilton?
My Shot was kind of a pump-up song for me when I was getting ready for debates and things. The original, and then on the mixtape, the one with Busta Rhymes, no better way to get in the mood for a really important event, get your adrenaline going.
Can you drop some bars for us?
What's that?
Can you drop some bars?
I can see the memes already. I'm going to restrain myself. I'm really excited. You know, I still remember very early on when we were dating, before it was that much of a thing, Chasten, who's a teacher and always on the lookout for interesting ways to teach kids and get them excited about things like history. So, there's this musical, you wouldn't believe it. I was like, okay. And then I finally, he made sure that I heard it, and it blew us both away.
You have an impressive library behind you. Have you read all of these books, or are there props to make you look smarter than what we already know you are?
I have read many of them. How about that? I've consulted almost all of them. No, I wish I had. I love reading, but I'll be honest, I start way more books than I finish. I think it's a good time to be surrounded by books.
Well, in full disclosure, I haven't quite finished your book either, so I understand where you're coming from. Since we're keeping it real.